Hello beautiful people, today we're talking about 10.4 solving radical equations. These are the answers for your warm-up. And for this lesson we're going to be solving each of these equations. One thing to remember is that the opposite of squaring is square root and the opposite of square root is squaring. So for number 1 you have 6 radical x minus 30 equals 0. I'm going to do this the same way that you've done before and try to isolate the variable. So first I'm going to add 30 to both sides. And I have 6 radical x is equal to, these cancel out, so 30. Then I will divide by 6 on both sides and I have radical x is equal to 5. In order to get rid of the square root, you are going to square both sides. So these will cancel out and you have just x is equal to 5 squared is 25. No plus or minus because you didn't square root both sides, you squared both sides instead. So number 2, same thing that you just did for number 1, or similar to it, except this time I'm just going to subtract 5. And I have the square root of 8x is equal to 8. I cannot divide by 8 yet because it's inside of the radicand. So I'm going to go ahead and square to get rid of that radical sign. And I have 8x is equal to 64. Divide both sides by 8. X equals 8. There you go. So for your next example, same directions, just slightly different. So what I'm going to do is I'm still going to treat this the same way that I did before. So I want to isolate it. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. And I have 3 radical 4x plus 1 is equal to 27. Divide both sides by 3. Square root of 4x plus 1 is equal to 9. Now to get rid of that radical, I'm going to square both sides. And I have these canceling out, so I have 4x plus 1 is equal to 81. This is a linear equation, so we can solve this by subtracting 1 on both sides and then dividing by 4. So I have x is equal to 20. If you could, please go ahead and press pause and try number 4 on your own. Alright, go ahead and check your work with my work. After you subtracted 5 on both sides, you have the radical by itself, so you square both sides there. X plus 3 equals 121. Subtract 3 on both sides, 118. So just check your work, make sure that we match. Okay, and flipping your paper over probably, you have something that looks a little bit different because you have 2 different radicals. Thing is, you cannot just square directly because that's going to end up being a mess. So I want to separate these 2. Whenever you have 2 radicals on the same side, go ahead and separate them if at all possible. So this is the one I'm choosing to move. I'm going to add radical x plus 7 on both sides. And I have the square root of 2x plus 10 is equal to the square root of x plus 7. Now it's okay for me to get my radical by itself. So I'm going to have you go ahead and square both sides. And so these cancel out, and I have 2x plus 10 is equal to x plus 7. Now you have an equation with variables on both sides, so I'm going to go ahead and collect the variables all on one side. So I'm going to subtract x and subtract x. I have x plus 10 is equal to, these cancel out, 7. Now to get x by itself, I will subtract 10, and I have x is equal to negative 3. There you go. So number 6, I also have variables on both sides, but I still need to square both of them. So I'm going to have x squared equals 20 minus x. Now for this occasion, it's different from here because on your last example you had an x term and an x term. Now you have an x squared and an x. Whenever you have that x squared and an x, you want to go ahead and get everything on one side. So I'm going to add x. And I'm also going to see what I have here. I have x squared plus x equals 20. I want one side equals 0, so I'm going to subtract 20 on both sides. X squared plus x minus 20 equals 0. Two options. I can use a quadratic formula or I can factor. This looks kind of factor friendly, so I'm going to go ahead and use a factor box. So I need two numbers that will multiply to give me negative 20x squared, and that will add to give me x. And I'll be using, let's try to get my box together. This box, I'm going to squeeze it in right here. First term goes in the first box, last term goes in the last box. Two numbers that multiply to give me negative 20 and add to give me x. Negative 4x and positive 5x work. So I'm going to have negative 4x and 5x. Now factoring using my factor box. These both have an x in common. These have a negative 4. These have an x in common. And these have a 5. So this in factored form is x minus 4 times x plus 5 equals 0. So I can solve x minus 4 equals 0, x plus 5 equals 0. Add 4. So my first answer is x equals 4. And then my other answer, after I subtract 5 on both sides, is x equals negative 5. There you go. One more example for you. Solve. Similar to what we just did, except I don't know if you noticed, but I did leave a lot of space for this one. It's because it's a little bit longer. So I do want to square, and I do want to square right away. The right side is nice and user-friendly because I know that these are going to cancel out. But this x plus 1 is actually a special product. And I'll just write it right here, actually. A plus b squared equals a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. Now, if you just are completely anti this formula, you can FOIL, you can use a box, you can use distributive to do whatever you have to do to multiply this out. But I just think this is a little bit faster. So the a, so this is like your a and this is your b. So a squared, x squared, plus 2ab, a, b, plus b squared is equal to, now these we said cancel out, so 6 minus 2x. I'm going to go ahead and simplify my left side. I have x squared plus 2x, 2 times x times 1, plus 1 equals 6 minus 2x. Now I have an x squared and I have an x term, so like that previous example, I'm going to go ahead and get everything on one side. So I'm going to add 2x, and I have x squared plus 4x plus 1 equals 6. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 6 on both sides, and I have x squared plus 4x minus 5 equals 0. I need a factor. So I'm going to go ahead and use this extra space that you have. And my first term goes in my first box, my last term goes in my last box. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me negative 5x squared, and that add to give me 4x. I'm thinking positive 5 and negative 1x. Positive 5x and negative 1x. So factoring, these both have an x, these both have a 5, x, and negative 1. So for me in factored form, this is x plus 5 times x minus 1 equals 0. Then you'll solve each set. Oops. And that should lead you to your answer. Sorry about that. So hopefully you're solving right now. And after you subtract 5 on both sides, you get x equals negative 5. And after adding 1, you get x equals 1. And there you go. Now try some practice problems on your own.